Morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be invited here to interact with you. Partly because I was sitting there about how many years? 30 years? 84, 85 was here. That means how many years? I'm very poor in mathematics. 30 years? Yep. Makes me feel old, but certainly not old psychologically. I did my MA here in English literature. Steve was my junior. And then we moved over to journalism. I thought I should give you a brief about myself. Got into Citizens Evening, then worked with the News Time, then with the Indian Express, then moved over to the Hindu about 20 years ago, 21 to be precise. When we talk about reporting, I'm sure your teachers would be telling you about how to write a report, what qualities a reporter should have, what are the different types of leads, so on and so forth. But unfortunately, what is not taught in a classroom, journalism is one thing where you learn a lot out of the classroom. Classroom can only give you the line of direction on which you'll have to go on building up on your own. Otherwise, if you are planning to join any media organization or any other field, it could be print, it could be television, it could be electronic, it could be social media, it could be power, public relations, advertising, whatever. The kind of a knowledge transfer that takes place here from the podium to the students can help you only in certain ways. If you go beyond that, you will be a successful person. How to go beyond that, I will be able to help you, because when I was a student sitting like you, I had the advantages and the disadvantages. The disadvantages were the media industry at that time was in a very rudimentary stage. It was to have a look at the BBC news clip on a VCR here in this classroom was the biggest thing, because BBC News capsules were having lot of visuals, live visuals. So we used to be amazed at seeing the BBC news clips. The biggest thing what we could, journalism students had access was a ticker, a UNI ticker or PTI ticker in the next room, a teleprinter. So that was the time when we entered into the profession. Now the media industry has seen very tectonic changes. Revolutions have come now. So in this backdrop, if you want to get into any field, be it journalism or be it public relations, advertising, civil services, government service, private service, whatever, I think this particular course, MCJ or MA, what is it called now? MCJ, will give you that sort of a springboard, provided you understand the limits of classroom teaching, knowledge transfer that takes place here, and how to utilize that outside. In that particular aspect, I wanted to talk to you. I did not want to limit my interaction with you talking only about jobs in or how to get into a newspaper sort of a thing, because I am sure I do not know how many of you will be able to get into print or journalism as such. Having said that thing, if you want to be successful in your life, once you step out of this great institution, your success is going to be measured not in terms of your percentage here, but what you are. For that, you need to go beyond the classroom. If you are aiming to be a journalist, first thing you have to do is to read, nothing beyond that. Read. The advantage you have in this department is your ability or your exposure to the world through the excellent library you have, through the excellent net connectivity you have. We'll talk about journalism and then move over to the other things. So what makes, as you know, in media industry, you will get into fixed slots. One is a reporter. On the content generation side, we'll come to that classification later. The content generation side, you will get into a reporter job or onto the desk. If you are entering into the TV electronic medium also, again a reporter who will stand in front of the camera, or on the desk again you will curate the copy. So essentially it boils down into content generation and content curation. In addition to this, the latest advent into the media scape is the social media, the mainstream media, which is broadly newspapers, radios and the television, and now the latest entry is the social media. Social media as a tool of dissemination of information is gaining prominence with such a rapid velocity that it is consuming all other forms now. So if you want to be a successful journalist, you will have to learn the art, or your skill components should have convergence of all these streams: your ability to write, your ability to edit, your ability to speak fluent language in front of a camera without a gap, your ability to collect information, your ability to collate information, your ability to present that information, your ability to analyze that information, whether you are for print or electronic, and your ability to reach out to the audience instantly. Use of social media. How many of you are on Facebook? Raise your hands. Almost all. On Twitter? Raise your hands. I would like to see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. BuzzFeed? 1. Sorry? Instagram. The latest entry into this thing, why you should be focusing now is that the ability to instantly communicate with others is assured by the new entrant, that is the mobile phone. Gone are those days. If you look at the evolution of the dissemination of the process of dissemination of information, is that first it was their print, newspapers, radio, then came the television, then came the round-the-clock television. Simultaneously, you had this internet connectivity, you have the websites, and then you have the social media. In India, you'll find it a peculiarity happening. In the Western countries, the progression was very similar. Newspaper, radio, television, the desktop internet connectivity, broadband connectivity leading to websites, and then the social media. But in India, if you look at that thing, if you look at this progression of the evolution of this revolution, it started with the radio and newspapers, progressed to television, and the broadband connectivity leading to these websites. Every newspaper, every TV, everything has a website. Even before we cross that stage, we are jumping directly into the social media revolution because of the phenomenal growth of the technology and the peculiarity of this growth of technology in India is that you need not spend lot of money to utilize the latest technology. Earlier, the situation was that you need to invest lot of money. The latest technology, what we have seen in our days, was the VCR. But to use the technology, you had to spend 10,000 rupees. I don't know whether you know. There were video libraries which were renting out VCRs. But now, the kind of a technology, the mobile revolution that is taking place, from the internet broadband, you have gone on to the mobile revolution. Now what we see is a touchscreen generation. You are all digital natives. You did not see the analog revolution. Or perhaps you would have seen the end of analog revolution moving into the digital revolution. Now the next thing is the mobile generation, the touchscreen generation, where information, the process of consuming information is undergoing at a rapid change. First it was newspaper or television, then the websites on the desktops, then laptops. Now it is on the mobile screen. The latest trend is how you get your information into the locked screen of your mobile. So this is the way the industry is changing. And you don't need to spend lot of money. If you spend 5,000 rupees, you get a good Android touchscreen phone, which is almost comparable with an expensive iPhone. So money is not a factor, and the technology is developing. While the penetration of broadband connectivity in India is pegged at around 20 or 22%, I am not sure. The broadband connectivity, 60% of population has access to mobile phones. 60%. Out of this 60% mobile connectivity, even if you look at 2G connection, I am not talking about 4G or LTE, 2G is available for 100 rupees per month even in the remotest parts of the country. So the information consumption is going through a change. If this is the industry scenario, how would you get into that industry? If you come to me seeking for a job saying that I can write well, I will not consider you for a job, because in addition to writing, I would expect you to be hyperactive on social media, your ability to tweet. How many of you tweet every day? Not many. I can understand that thing. Tweeting is the most difficult form of writing, is tweeting now. Summing up everything into 140 characters, maintaining that sort of correctness in what you write and putting it in 140 characters is the most difficult task. Even after 31 years of writing, even now I find it difficult to tweet. So this is the kind of skills you will have to nurture. I don't know to what extent the classroom knowledge, the teachers would be able to tell you how to write a tweet, but you don't need a teacher to do that thing. If you are alive to that, you will become hyperactive. I'll come back to this again. Whether you join journalism, or whether you join as a research associate in the United Nations, or whether you join a public relations company, this skill will be of use. Even if you want to go for, let's say, the civil services, this skill will be of vital importance to you in future. And you are in an institution or in a department where the atmosphere is open. It is not structured, and not like English literature where you have to study only the things that are there. So take advantage of that and improve your skills in these levels. To put it very shortly, start practicing tweeting. I think it should be a classroom experiment in every class that everybody should tweet at least put out 10 tweets while the lecture is going on. That will sharpen your mind to take the auditory input, what Steve tells you, what Srinivas Reddy tells you, process that information, process that auditory input, rephrase it, put it out on a tweet. It's a real-time working that is going to be the challenge. Gone are those days, or gone is the consolation that a development is taking place now. I can go back to office, have my coffee and a cigarette, and then write a story which will reach the readers tomorrow. That is gone, dead and gone. Though the print media still goes by that thing, I am sure you would have seen that our focus is more on to the digital platforms. The print platform is there, but at the same time, all Indian newspapers are going through a phase where they are trying to integrate the digital platforms. Our presence is there on the print as well as on the digital platforms. So if you are moving into this industry, it is important you learn this skill. If you are moving into an advertising agency or public relations or whatever is this thing, the kind of a focus the governments have on social media now. I'm sure you would have seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi's emphasis on Twitter. If you see Narendra Modi's way of communicating with the people, he has almost neglected the mainstream media, and he is establishing his own direct communication channels with the people. One day he is using the radio to talk to the children, school children. Another day he is using Google Hangout to talk to opinion leaders, or his office is making use of Twitter to at such a level that even trained journalists are unable to cope with the inflow of information. That means there could be a deliberate ploy by the PMO that the information that is sought to be given out by the Prime Minister or his office, earlier system was it used to go to a select group of journalists through a press conference or through a press release or whatever. It used to be reproduced by this set of people which would reach the readers or viewers. In that process, perhaps Narendra Modi must have thought that there is a spin being given. So he is opting to reach the audiences directly. PMO is on Twitter. Narendra Modi is on Twitter. He is tweeting right from international developments to the local decisions they are tweeting now. So this is the importance of the social media, and if you have to get into that mode, please start tweeting. Facebook is fine, but Facebook gives you the luxury of putting out 3 paras, 4 paras, I am feeling bored, I am hungry, I am sleepy, whatever, fine. That is a personal level of communication between you and your followers, people who like you there. Twitter is a more professional one. BuzzFeed is a more professional one. Instagram is a more professional one. Just 2 days ago, Siddharth Varadarajan and others have started a newspaper only on Facebook. The Quint. Facebook and Twitter, that's all. No print editions. So as and when a development happens, some expert will write something and they are pushing it out. You can check it out. The Quint. Quint. So if your eyes are set on media industry or general this thing, you must develop these skills. We'll come to the reporting side of it. The job given to me, the direction is that reporting, how to go for reporting, what problems, so on and so forth. I'm sure your textbooks will have lot of information about what makes a good reporter, nose for news and everything, this thing. But what textbooks do not teach you is that when you identify a possible story, getting that information, the human component of getting that information is the most difficult thing to be taught in a classroom. You know something is happening. You know that source of information is so and so. But if that source happens to be unwilling, what would you do? I'm talking about a developing story. Analysis comes later. When you become well versed with reporting, when you can tackle any source who is unwilling to speak, a reticent source, when you gather that expertise, then comes the analysis. Analysis is you take a call on a particular development and write and let it out. That is not news, that is analysis. Your view, your interpretation. Your interpretation based on the accumulated experience of watching a particular field, whether it is international affairs, Indo-Pak relations, or West Asian crisis, or left-wing extremism, separatism, Northeast, or whatever. This is the age of what's a specialization. Excuse me. Where were we? Age of specialization. Specialization. If ever you are getting into reporting, you will be entering at the entry level reporter or perhaps a senior reporter if your writing skills are very good. If you are to be a good reporter, number one is identifying what constitutes news. What are the developments? What can be informed to the reader? How to get that information? Providing, one is identification of news and then collection. Then the third most crucial thing is contextualization of the information you collect. For example, if you write about a demonstration outside Arts College on whatever issue, scholarships, water problem, or students issue, whatever. A typical reporter would go and cover that and say that so and so thing has happened, 5Ws, 1H, inverted pyramid, whatever technique you use in writing, the narrative. The technique lies in giving some sort of a context to that. Why it is happening. Why not as a why in that 5Ws, 1H. But a little bit of a contextualization is useful when you keep that reader who is not exposed to this development in view. Somebody sitting there in what's the United States, or let us say Charminar, is reading something of what happened in front of Arts College. There must be some sort of a 1 second, I must take this call. So where were we? Contextualization. That you will have to understand. When you contextualize it, it provides a 360-degree view of the particular development. It is not just sufficient to say that something is happening, why it is happening, in what context it is happening, so that a reader outside will understand that. Then if you are looking at the content curation after the report is filed, I can go on talking about reporting techniques. Reporting is something, where you will have to literally move a lot. Telephones won't help you. How to tackle a reticent source is another technique which you will learn only on field. Practically, you will have to nurture that skill on your own. There are no classroom examples that Srinivas Reddy can get information. Why can't you? Your boss may be asking that thing, but there are no hard and fast rules of getting information. So that is where collection of information is your ability to communicate, ability to strike some sort of minimum understanding with the source of information, and that getting that information, that becomes important. Whether you move into Telugu or Hindi or English media, this is going to be the challenge for a reporter. If you come to the editing side, the problem would be curating this copy and making it presentable. Curating the copy is not just correcting the grammar and giving a good headline, but the role of a sub-editor has gone beyond that thing, and you will have to present it in a format which is readable, which is attractive enough for the reader, if you are looking at the print medium. And also the reporter, when he comes out with lot of information, the contextualization, your ability to visualize that, how that item would look on a page or on the screen of a television, the intelligent use of the graphics. If you are moving into electronic medium, it would be presentation of the news, the anchor reads, so you will write what the anchor reads. Then you go for the voiceover. You will give opportunity for the reporter to narrate a sequence of events, what is happening there, and then interpolate it with some sort of a graphs or infographics, what we call the percentages that happen. If you are talking about, let us say, increasing number of road accidents, you will take a look at what happened in the last 4 years. You will try to identify which are the accident prone spots, and then how do you present that visually? If you are in a print medium or if you are in an electronic medium, differs. Print medium, I can take advantage of a graphic artist and then have a graph sort of a thing. Identify the road stretches which are accident prone. If I am working for a television, I will go for a video clip and show that, and an interactive infographic can be done on this thing and for the television. So for that you need visualization. It means you are not only playing with words while writing or typing, but you are visualizing. Unless you visualize, you become a routine sub-editor. Unless you provide the contextual information, you become a routine report. Got my point? This is the difference. If you have to be successful in these counts, you will have to use the contextualization for a reporter, and reporter also needs to visualize sometimes, saying that this is how it is going to look on the screen. This is how it will be seen on the print edition. This is how it will be seen on the web edition. This is how a graphic can be done. This is how data can be interpreted. The collection, collation, and interpretation. Visual presentation also is added now. Earlier, hitherto it was not there. When you are moving into this industry, you will have to look at all these four: collection, interpretation, presentation, and visualization. And throw in this entry of social media again. You don't have the luxury of writing 250 words or 350 words on a particular development, 140 characters. What do? That means you must be able to understand the development and present it in such a simple language that those who use Twitter will not be able to refer to a dictionary and write. That means the simplest language must be used to put out a tweet. And it is going to be the most difficult one because you can use all your vocabulary and write a report for a seminar to be organized by the English Literature Department. But in journalism, this is going to be a seminar paper every day with use of the simple language. This is where everybody gets stuck. Either you are too convoluted with your sentences or you use too many adjectives, which the team leaders will not like. So the moment you give a copy, I see a lot of interns coming and giving copy, they write essays. We say use simple language, cut out all the adjectives, express, play with verbs. If you read the AFP report today about a rally organized in Russia against Charlie Hebdo, against the publication of these cartoons by Charlie Hebdo. There was a particular sentence that caught my attention today. It said thousands of people flooded into the streets. Flooded is a verb. Verbs always play on that imagery. It triggers that imagination. The moment you say thousands of people gathered, it gives a different, it provides an opportunity for the reader to visualize in a different way. When you say flooded, it gives a different connotation. So, gathered and flooded are two simple words, but your ability to use a correct verb at the correct time, correct place, makes a lot of difference when you write. This is a practical tip which I can tell you. Then, if you look at the page making techniques, I'm sure you will be making these pages where don't use we have a propensity to introduce some sort of a variety into the print. This thing. So we use different fonts, we use different font sizes, we use different colors. It's better to have a color palette and it's better to have standard use of fonts. Just because you have 180 fonts available on the computer, you should not tinker with that thing. A sense of a balance needs to be seen. The kind of when you design a page, you should look at the page architecture. Page architecture you will not be able to visualize. The biggest problem would be you will be making pages on a Mac here, on a small computer screen. When that image is transferred onto a page, which is 1x4 or 1x3 demi or whatever dimensions, when that image gets transferred onto the page or onto the screen, the television screen, it looks different. The technique is to detach yourself. You do something, step back take 4 steps back and look at that thing and try to visualize. Okay, how would it look on this size paper? When we design pages in the Hindu is a broadsheet, right? 54 centimeters print area. What we see is a 16-inch on the screen. So when we say DC column or a four column picture, it looks entirely different on the page. It could be too big, it could be too less. So you will have to be extremely careful about the color. These are some of the production techniques which you could use if ever you go for an interview or if ever you do something here. These are the things I'm sure they would be telling you. But why I'm repeating these things is that despite doing all these courses here, I had to unlearn myself and learn again. So here the teachers are slightly more accommodating. They are not worried about the deadlines. They are more accommodating when you use different colors. But in newspaper business, you get shouted at. And well, in some papers abused also. And then the biggest ability is to write. Even if you move into a television, what's this thing, your ability to form the short sentences, crisp sentences, your ability to narrate. There are two ways of reading. One is two ways of reading or taking that information, assimilating that information. When you see a news clip or when you read a news item, you use that for a temporary use. Let us say the random access RAM. Examination is postponed. There is going to be a bandh. This road is clogged. You would like to use it for your immediate benefit. You got to remember that thing. The second way to read is to the second way a reader reads it is, a person reads it is, he lives in that this thing. It is as if the report becomes a narrative in which you identify yourself. It triggers that sort of imagination. If this is the two ways of reading, how do you live up to that expectation? Not all reports you write or you file will fall into only one category. It will be both. The technique lies in identifying which one is which. This is the success of a reporter. Which report should be straight away cut and write, 5 Ws and 1 H. Which is a report you can introduce some sort of a feature-ish writing where these 5 Ws and 1 H are replaced by the characters. So, I would say there are three ways of writing then. One is straight, following a violent demonstration in front of the arts college on Usmania University campus. Authorities have clamped curfew. Straight information. Or you can featureize it in such a way, and what could be the industry and this and that thing. I think if you have any questions, I think that would be better instead of me going on yakking about what is what. Shoot any question. I'll be truthful in answering whatever I know about this industry.
Can you tell us something about conflict reporting?
Conflict reporting, you mean, what do you want to know about conflict?
I mean, your entry into it, what made you decide to get into it?
Yeah. Conflict reporting is something, as you know, when I took interest in trying to study or understand or report about the Maoist activity in late 80s. Joined the profession in 1985. At that time, this conflict, the party which you see now, the CPI Maoist was earlier known as the People's War, CPI-ML People's War, which was pretty active in 5 North Telangana districts. And as I hail from North Telangana districts, perhaps I knew a little bit background about the movement, how it started. I had seen the Jagitial Jaitra Yatra. I had seen the annihilation of the class enemy. I had seen the formation of these squads in rural areas, because I was exposed to that. When I moved into media industry here, perhaps I took a liking, or perhaps this background knowledge to some extent of coming from Karimnagar, that is a strife-torn area, a highly affected area. In those days, there was not many people who were trying to understand what exactly is New Democratic Revolution. The slogan of Maoists is achieving the New Democratic Revolution through protracted armed struggle. So not many people were writing about it, and naturally I took to that and tried to understand that. So when we report conflict, the biggest hurdle we face is that you are accused of siding with one participant, either the combatant or the non-combatant, either the state or the revolutionary. So the biggest problem I faced was in respect of that, because at that time the state had unleashed a severe crackdown on the revolutionary activity, and that was the time when one of the journalists was also shot dead in a cold-blooded fake encounter just on the outskirts of Hyderabad here. Ghulam Rasul was his name. Along with him, there was another Maoist activist, People's War activist, who was caught. Both of them were caught together. The police allegation was that this guy, in the garb of being a journalist, was supporting the revolutionary activity, and he was also shot dead. That was the recent Azad and Pandey is a very recent one. I'm talking about 85, 86. Uh, conflict reporting, you face such dilemmas when you are exposed to this sort of a violence, the most cruel forms of death, either people being beaten to death or shot dead in cold blood by the state, by the police, or by the so-called revolutionary who claims to work for the benefit of the society. When they indulge in violence, it rather unsettles you. I have seen instances where the Maoists had cut off the heads like what we see in ISIS now. It was a standard practice. I still recall, I still have dreams about that Vangapahad incident where they killed somebody in the name of an informer, chopped off his head and forced his wife to carry that head and move around the village. Next day when I reached there, that head was still there and the lady was sitting there. It still haunts me. I have also seen people being blown to pieces when the Naxalites used a dynamite, fixed a dynamite to the stomach of a person called Krupakar Reddy in Warangal district and blew him to pieces. I have seen that thing. Similarly, I have seen faces of policemen who were blown to pieces by landmine explosions. 3 of my close friends were killed in landmine explosions. I'm sure Steve would recall an officer called Kishore Kumar who was in my room preparing for that sub-inspector examinations. In 1991, he was blown. Unfortunately, I had to go there to report his death also. All I could see of Kishore was only of part this one. There was nothing left downwards. Madhav Reddy. You get exposed to this sort of violence which sometimes, I wonder, dehumanizes you. Conflict reporting is, the biggest problem with conflict reporting is not writing something, sitting in Hyderabad or Delhi and writing about Kashmiri Pandits or Northeast or this thing. But when you expose to this violence, this is going to the biggest dilemma, because in other beats or in other subjects which you choose, you are happy with yourself. You are reporting business. You are all exposed to goody things, people wearing ties and shaking hands, polished shoe. You opt to report conflict reporting. You are at the mercy of nature. You walk through the jungles, cross country, rain, whatever. You are exposed to the most dehumanizing incidents, either by the state or by the revolutionaries. This is the biggest conflict which anyone reporting conflict will face, whether it is incidents in ISIS or war reporting or this thing. This is nothing short of a war what India is seeing now. So having talked about the biggest dilemma, how to go about it as a journalist, especially in the backdrop of the threat of being branded either as a police agent or as a Maoist. Those were the days when whoever had beard like you were being branded as a Naxalite. I used to sport a beard. So, bearded fellow from Karimnagar, oh, Mao, Naxalite sort of. I'm not joking. You wear a red shirt or a shade of red like this, you're branded as a Naxalite. We had a top Naxalite leader in our hostel called Santosh Reddy, who was the vice president of Arts College Students Union, a central committee member who was shot dead in Karimnagar in 2000. He was a central committee member. Unfortunately, I happened to know Santosh Reddy. I interviewed him later. Unfortunately, my friends were there. He in this side, my friends were there. So that is the biggest contradiction you see. The utility or the futility of violence. Number 2, as a professional journalist, if you have to maintain that sort of a detached this thing, it takes tremendous amount of your mental energy to become detached. When you see violence, whether it is a lathi charge here, which unfortunately I was exposed to in front of Arts College during the peak of this bifurcation agitation, or getting caught in a crossfire, remaining aloof from that becomes extremely difficult. You tend to identify yourself either with the aggressor or with the victim. Generally what happens is when you cover these agitations, For example, the best example is the Telangana agitation, for which this place was the fountainhead. The kind of violence that was being seen here, reporters tend to side with either the police or the agitationists. And then a little straying this way, that way, an expression which would appear to be justifying the cause of the agitator, or an expression which would be seen as supporting the aggression by the police, will brand you as this thing. Ye to sala police ka hai, police agent. No, he is a total outright Telangana fellow hai. So that is the most difficult one, and to get out of that thing, a journalist reporting conflict, I found through my experience, is that you got to be totally impartial. Sometimes so bloody impartial and so bloody detached from that you don't respond to a development as a human being but as a journalist. You see 10 bodies being blown to pieces, you don't get emotional and start weeping there. Though I did weep sometimes, I must confess. But then when you slip into the role of a journalist, you become a very cold-blooded fellow and start typing out the story and pushing it out. That is the biggest one. The number two, information collection in conflict reporting is very, very dicey affair. Because on one hand you are dealing with an ultra-secret violent political party, and on the other hand you see an ultra-secret democratic institution or an instrument of state which is working against this group. You have to strike a balance. I think I somehow managed to achieve a balance here, because I was taken into confidence by this side and that side also. In retrospect, now I can say that perhaps I was the only guy to interview Ganapati twice. Ganapati, the chief of Maoists, even now. Or perhaps I was the only guy to have been caught in a crossfire, where I had to see a landmine explosion and an SI being killed, and the Maoists opening fire on me, police were opening fire on me, and moving with the Maoists in Bastar, where in the Salvazudum, you remember that Mahendra Karma incident. Those were the areas I frequently visited on the invitation of the Maoists, as well as I moved 4 days in that bloody particular area with Mahendra Karma, who was recently, 2 years ago, he was killed. So to get into the confidence levels, your writings must be absolutely impartial. Number two, you must be able to accept that you have done a mistake and say it openly. It requires tremendous amount of courage to say that, yes, I have done a wrong thing. Or when you justify that, you don't indulge in a argument which appears to be based on aggression rather than on sound logic. I'll give you one example also. In 1995, when Maoists have declared North Telangana as a guerrilla zone, according to the Maoist ideology, it defines that the revolutionary and the state are on equal footing, and whoever wins will take control of that area. This is the standard technique of protracted armed struggle, guerrilla zone. When they declared it, the entire nomenclature changed. What was used to be called as a dalam was named as a guerrilla squad. The central guerrilla squad, local guerrilla squad, the central committee, they started wearing olive green uniforms, they started wielding AK-47s. So the definitive military culture was sought to be introduced into that old system of dalams, 1+2 formation. Dalam was one guy with a rifle and 2 gunmen would be there. I disagreed with the Maoists on that particular count, saying that North Telangana has not reached the stage where it can be declared as a guerrilla zone. By declaring it as a guerrilla zone and giving these fancy names, Maoists are doing a great injustice to themselves, because the cadre, the revolutionaries who were moving with these guns and olive greens, the newfound identity of the squads, newfound identity of a tribal girl, hardly 15 years, but wearing olive greens and calling herself a squad member of the Central Guerrilla Squad, Mangi area. Their introduction itself would say that I am so and so, Swarnaka from Mangi area, central government squad, Lal Salam. This is how they use. In the sense, on one level, you can see that that was a ploy employed by the Maoist party to give that sort of strength, moral courage, and the justification for being a revolutionary. But from an outside, as a non-Maoist, as a neutral observer, I could see that this is going to lead to a lot of violence which will serve no purpose. When I wrote a quarter-page article, there was a lot of discussion in the People's War circles, and one of the Central Committee members who was later killed, Azad, he engaged me in a 2-hour discussion on phone. What I learned from the Maoists is that they never get angry when you shoot all these questions. They try to explain. They would tell you that, your thinking comes from that bourgeoisie mentality. Therefore, I need to explain it to you. When I asked Ganapati, how could you indulge in such mindless violence? So he would tell me, oh, you say it is mindless violence. I can understand why you are terming it as mindless violence. Because you come from that middle class, bourgeois mentality, therefore you see this. But I see the utility of violence. He would talk to me for 4 hours on that particular use of word called mindless. So when the same Maoist called me, his chief lieutenant called me and disagreed with me, I used the same technique of trying to understand, make him understand why I wrote this. It was not an item written just like that. It was an item written, an analysis written based on certain argument that a guerrilla zone is declared when partial struggles continue to happen in a contiguous area. What is a partial struggle? Small struggles. Are you familiar with these terminologies? Partial struggle, Pakshika Poratalu. A struggle launched by a small group of people for enhancement of wages, for uninterrupted supply of power, forcing the government to supply power uninterruptedly. We want seeds, don't towards increase bus fares. These are all partial struggles. The Maoist ideology, the Marxist-Leninist Maoist thought says that as these partial struggles take place in a contiguous area, these partial struggles will succeed. If Singareni there was a strike for better wages, it succeeds because government will always come down and give wages. So once the successes come in the partial struggles, which happen across large swathes of area, contiguous areas, people will get further revolutionized. When they get further revolutionized, they take to guns and join the long march, leading to the new democratic revolution, which is Nutana Prajaswamika Viplavam. This is the sum and substance, their ideology. But when I said, I disagreed with Azad on that particular count that, the partial struggles are not taking place. So he would accuse me of sitting in Hyderabad in air-conditioned rooms and writing this news analysis. I would tell him that, no, it is not like that. I hail from an area which is currently seeing the strife. I come from a lower middle class family which is a victim of this thing. I come from a family which has seen that, still has that scars of violence embedded in its collective psyche. I would tell him. So he would understand. Then he would try to engage me in this thing. So, conflict reporting, when you write something, it has to be based on solid premises, on a logical, this thing, because tomorrow your reader is turning back and questioning you. Am I getting lost? So that is the biggest problem in conflict reporting. So a situation would come when you disagree with them, you are accused of being a supporter of the state. It happened in my case. The Maoist party put out my name and wrote an open letter. Not hit list. No, I wouldn't say that. Hit list is not. Hit list is something that is for the combatants. I am not a combatant here. They wrote an open letter saying that K. Srinivas Reddy, city editor, The Hindu. An open letter to so-and-so Srinivas Reddy. You are an intelligence mouthpiece, you are this, you are that, you are aiming to control this, sabotage this revolution, so on and so forth. They put it on a People's March, a magazine, which is there on the web also even now. So, for that, I was rattled actually. I was getting calls from across the country saying that, okay, you are branded as an enemy of the People's War. Better be careful. I would say that, no, why should I be worried? They are not going to kill me. But then there was some sort of discussion again with the party where I had argued that, no, okay, look at me and tell me I am the enemy of People's War or I am a friend. I don't claim to be an enemy. I am a dispassionate observer. You may disagree with me, but I have every right of disagreeing with you and telling you that I disagree. They accepted that. They carried a clarification also. But again, this clarification, like what we do, if the open letter was on page 1, clarification went in page 18. Nobody would notice. So these are the problems of conflict reporting. And right now, conflict reporting has got a lot of importance now. In India itself, you see 3 or 4 major conflicts happening, conflict scenario. The Kashmir, Northeast, left wing, and to some extent you can also classify this Islamist, not Islamic, Islamist revolutionary ideas. You know, the kind of violence they have a penchant to use. Not only in India, everywhere. I think this conflict reporting is going to be the in thing now. What with the world, moving into a situation where the polarization is taking place not on the ideology, but based on religion and so on and so forth. The Clash of Civilizations. If you read Samuel Huntington, The Clash of Civilization, it makes terrific sense to read that book now. Clash of Civilizations. How just about 2 decades ago we were divided on the basis of ideologies, the communism, capitalism, this and that thing. Everything is vanishing and now it is turning into a clash of civilization. And Samuel Huntington had anticipated this 3 decades ago, 3 or 4 decades ago perhaps. I'm sure we have a copy here, Clash of Civilization. It makes terrific sense to read that thing. If you're going to be a journalist, or if you're trying to take these civil service examinations or government services, you should be studying that. Whether you are in journalism or in doing MA philosophy or anything, you should be aware of all these things, because this is what that will not be taught to you in a classroom. Because you must also understand that I am not a teacher. I am only a back-end guy, who would just write something and silently walk out of something.